Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, canammissing project. Copyrighted edition for our video channel. I'm on the middle fork of the Flathead River. On the left side of the screen, over here, is Glacier National Park. And that is the river below us. And I'm gonna give you a really good view here. It is absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous here. It is really cold, and I'm on a bridge that, a human bridge, just for people, that spans the water and goes into the park. But you're fortunate that you have a great view like this. So, I'm going to talk to you about a few things I haven't really talked about before. And I've gotten a lot of requests to do this. So I said, why not? First of all, a lot of people don't know, and I was a victim of this when I was a young person, that come Christmas time, holiday time, that you'd go down to your local tree farm, maybe in the foothills, or you'd go down to your local department store and pick out a tree. Well, many years ago, when I started living in Colorado, I found out that you could go to the U.S. Forest Service, and you could do this online, and you could pay $5 and get a permit, and go into the U.S. Forest, managed by the U.S. Forest Service, and for $5 you could pick out a tree under 12 feet tall. And I started that process about a week ago, because a lot of people here in Montana do this. In fact, everyone, I think, does it. You go out, and it's kind of a family thing. You don't want to pick one too close to the road because those are all picked over, but sometimes you have to hike in a bit and bring your chainsaw or bring your handsaw and drag your tree out. It's a lot of fun. And right now, it is a little cold, so a lot of people don't want to go in very far, but you can't do it in the park. You can't be cutting down trees in the park. That's the one thing. So, I actually made a list because I didn't want to miss anything on... People have asked me, Dave, we know you've had some strange things happen to you in the woods. Why don't you ever talk about them? So, here we go. First one. When I was a small boy, my dad used to take me to a spot up by Lassen National Park where we'd go fishing. And I asked my dad, I said, how the heck did you ever find this? And he said, well, Dave, it's a good story. So when my dad was young, he used to like to hunt and fish all the time. And one time he was hunting up by Lassen National Park, and he and my grandfather met crossing paths on a hunting trip. And they started talking, and he goes, hey, I have a daughter at home, you might want to meet her. Where do you live? And he goes, I live in San Francisco. And he goes, I live in San Francisco. That's how my mom and my dad met. My grandfather saw my dad in the woods hunting and brought him home. And then when they were doing this, they got together and they said, well, hey, I like to fish and I like to hunt, and so where do you think we could do this at? And my grandfather said, hey, I have a really good spot that I found while I was hunting that I always wanted to go to. It's out near Lassen. It's a wicked hike in, and we might be able to get some good fishing out of it. So they went into it, and what they did is they found a place about, I don't know, maybe 10 miles on the north side of Mount Lassen in Lassen National Park. Outside the park, you're going to hear some people's voices down here. Little kids. And they started hiking in, and it's a wicked, very wicked, 3-mile hike down into this valley. And this area of the perimeter of Lassen gets super hot in the summer, and that's when we were going because it was trout fishing time. So we'd go in there, hike in, spend a night, and bring out, we'd each have limits of trout every time. It was a creek, maybe not quite as big as a river. You could cross it in some spots, but nobody went in there because, not that the hike in was wickedly hard, it's because the hike out was outrageously difficult, because it was almost straight uphill for 3 miles in 100-degree heat, and by the time you were out, you were just devastated. So my dad and I had gone into this spot 3 or 4 times, maybe 5 times. I was probably like 12 years old, 13 years old. And we hiked in, and as we were coming in, we saw a location where my dad said, hey, there's some huge fish in this hole, I remember. And it was one of the larger holes in this creek river. And as we're coming out, we drop all of our backpack and things that we're going to need for the night, and we walk over towards this beach that surrounds this big hole. And as we're walking into this hole, we decide that what we're going to do is we're going to look for the big fish in this area. And as we did, as we're walking up to it, all of a sudden we're smelling smoke. And you got to remember that this area, even back then, was really, really dry. I mean, one match, the whole valley would go up in smoke. And all of a sudden we're smelling smoke. My dad goes, hey, hold on. And he's trying to get his bearings on where it is. And we figure out it's probably 50 to 100 yards in front of us, right where we're going. So we walk up to this beach that surrounds this gorgeous fishing hole, and the beach is all sand. And right at the edge of the water, right where the water had turned the sand dark and where the sand was light, right there is this little teepee of fire. And teepee of fire, I mean like twigs and branches, maybe 8 to 10 inches long, like a teepee that had just got on fire. There's nobody around. There's no marks in the dark sand where you'd find tracks or something. The regular sand, it looked like it was all tracked up just like animals were in it. And you know how sand is, you really can't see a print. And my dad was carrying a gun. And all of a sudden his mood changed. I can't explain it. But it's like he knew something was not right here. First of all, when you run across fishermen and you're deep in the middle of nowhere, I've always found them to be super friendly people. And we always had a good time talking. Hey, how's the fish? And we'd share ideas. There's nobody around. And where we parked and started the hike in, keeping my eyes on the bush over here, where we parked and started our hike in, there wasn't another car, and there's really only one parking place in this area. So, not happy with what he was seeing. So he says, hey, let's stay right here for a second. And he walked up and down the bank, looked around. Nobody in their right mind would start a fire on that beach and walk away from it. And my dad was a fireman. And so he was pretty smart about how fires start, arson side of things. And we put the fire out, and he looked at it. He was trying to find a match in it or some sort of propellant, and couldn't find it. And he says, hey, we're not fishing. That's just about how he said it too. He says, come on. And we walked over to our packs, and he goes, we're leaving. I said, what? He said, we're leaving. He goes, whoever started that fire, I don't feel comfortable staying here. We're leaving. So for the next 3 hours, we made this wicked hike out. Now, we were living in the Bay Area then. I think we were living in Cupertino. And it's about an 8-hour drive there. About a 3-hour hike. An hour and a half hike in and a 3-hour hike out. We got out dead tired. Get in the car. And I remember us stopping at a gas station on the way when we got to I-5 in Redding. And we got some drinks and things, and my dad said, okay, let's see if we can make it home. If not, we'll stop at a hotel. We ended up getting home about midnight. And I remember my mom going, what are you guys doing here? My dad said, you won't believe the story. And that was the last time we ever went to that place fishing. That's how much it troubled my dad. So, very strange story. I asked him later on in life if he ever had any strange things happen to him in the woods. And he said no. So, He goes, that was the strangest, Dave, and you were there. So, yeah. Next story. So I was 23. I was a policeman in Fremont at the time. I was just getting ready to transfer to San Jose Police. And I had a really good friend that was in vet school at UC Davis. And we had planned a fishing trip to go to Northern California. And he goes, hey, how about a couple of my buddies go that are also in vet school? I go, great, let's bring them. So we all go up to Northern California, a place called the Scott River near Wairika. And the area is remote, fishing's really good, and never see anybody. So we get there, long drive, and we knew somebody who owned a piece of property up on the top of this knoll. And we go in there, nobody's on the property, lay out our bags, make some dinner, get to bed about 9 or 10, and we're just all laying in our bags in the open sun or in the open moonlight. All of a sudden, up above us, it's like a cluster of stars, but they're really bright. Really bright. And we're all talking about it. And then all of a sudden, these stars, whatever they were, start moving around. And for the next 3 hours, we were stunned that they would go from this point in the sky all the way to the other horizon, one of them. And the other one would go to the other horizon. The other one would go to the other horizon. And this would go on. This went on, and then they would come back together and cluster up and move together. And we had this great discussion about what in the heck could that be? And we said, hey, we don't know anything in this world that has technology that can move from the center of the sky, boom, right to there, and then boom, right back. It was bizarre. And that was really the first time I ever saw a UFO. And everybody agreed this got to be something out of this world. And it was a fun night, actually, because I was around some super smart people. And we all had a great discussion on what it might have been. But to this day, we still talk about it when we see each other. Now, when I was living in Los Gatos, California, I was getting my hair cut by a guy in Los Gatos named Frank. Frank still has his barbershop, Frank's Barbershop in Los Gatos. Absolutely tremendous guy. If you ever go into Frank's, tell him Dave said hi. And you'll see some plaques up there from my kids. But Frank and I always were talking, and he was interested in the type of Bigfoot work I was doing because he knew I was gone 50% of the time living in Hoopa. And he said, Dave, you know, they got some really good bear hunting up there. You want to go with me? I said, yeah, let's go. So we went up there, and outside the reservation in the National Forest, camped for a couple nights. First night we get up real early. We go into this area, lots of trees. There's a plane out there. And it's an orange and white plane, which signifies that it could be Forestry Service or search and rescue, but not sure what it is, but it's flying around. Might be an ongoing search that I haven't heard about. I don't know. I'll keep you informed if I see it again. That's what the sound is. So anyhow, Frank and I are walking along through this forest, and I had seen bears hundreds of times in this area. But now when we're there, there's no bears. There's no nothing. There's no people. Hadn't heard anything. So, a lot of strange sounds coming down that valley. Oh, it's a train. And you can hear it. Isn't it weird, you know, you have the calmness of the water, and then all of a sudden a train comes by and the calmness goes away and the chaos of the world is all of a sudden on you. Weird dynamic. I can hear that thing coming up the valley, and I wasn't sure what it was, but yeah. But anyhow, back to what I was saying. So Frank and I are in the middle of this forest, and Frank is probably 15 years older than me, been hunting his whole life, real outdoorsman. Says, Dave, says, you hear that? And we're staring at each other. I go, yeah, I do, Frank. It's dead quiet. He goes, yeah, that's weird. I go, yeah. And we find this Douglas fir tree, a big one, and he goes, I'm going to sit on one side, you sit on the other, until this sound comes back. I said, okay. So we sit down on each side of the tree for about 20 minutes, and I'm looking up in the sky, and there's no leaves rustling. It's really quiet. I mean, really quiet. There's no birds chirping. There's no nothing. And then 20, 25 minutes later, I'm looking up. All of a sudden, I can hear the wind rustling the bush. I can hear squirrels making sounds. I can hear the birds again. All of a sudden the forest sounds normal. And Frank said in 50 years in the woods that had never happened to him. But that's how acutely aware he was of the sounds and things that you hear in the woods. And when you think about that part of it, that you can think about the things that are happening around you, and then you can think about the what animals have to be on the prowl for. Okay, there goes the train. But that night, Frank and I talked about it all night long, and he goes, Dave, that was so strange. He goes, I've been doing this for 50 years. Never heard it before. Never had that happen. Very strange. Now we come down to peaceful quiet again. It's the next one I want to tell you. So the next few have a loose association to missing people. Angie and I went to a place out near Lander, Wyoming. And it was a case of a missing woman who was setting up a foot race in the mountains above Lander, and she disappeared. I knew the area where she had parked her car to set this race up, and I had written about it in Missing 411. Well, we stopped, and where she had parked her car in these mountains, rugged mountains, there was a huge swamp on the other side of where she parked. A big swamp. And I said, hey, let's try to find the backside of that swamp. So we're in my 4x4 and find a dirt road, and we take it for a couple miles all the way to the backside, and we get out. It's really quiet. So I said, let's have some fun. Let's see if I could, there's some wildlife here that we could stir up. So I cup my hands and I clap 3 times real loud with cupped hands. And within 5 seconds, the whole forest at the back end of this swamp came alive, and it sounded like a herd of buffalo or elk that were all coming straight for us. That's the best I could describe it. Angie and I both never heard anything like it before. I've never heard anything like it since. And it all sounded like it was collapsing on us I stood by the car. We each had a gun. We each pulled our gun and just waited by the car because we didn't know what was coming. And it got closer and closer and closer, and then it's like the doors closed and boom, there's no more sound. Angie goes, let's get in the car and leave. Good idea. And we left. We've talked about that incident a lot. What could have caused it? Because I'm looking for the trees on the backside to be moving, dust to be blowing up. Nothing like that was happening. I don't get it. I never got that one. But on the same trip, on the other side of the mountains from Lander was a town called Pinedale. And there's a gorgeous place called Green River Lakes in Wyoming. It's probably one of the prettiest spots I've ever been to that wasn't a national park. Yeah, it was a state park. Back when it wasn't a state park, it was private land. I wrote about a story of a young girl that went to visit her grandparents, and she disappeared there. And all they found was a pile of her clothes. So we walked up to the top of this small mountain knoll above the lake. And Angie was still pretty new at all this. But she's walking maybe 5 or 10 feet ahead of me, and it's a pretty open area. She goes, Dave, come here. So I come over there, and she's pointing to the ground on this like game trail. She goes, look at that. I look down, and there's a bare footprint in the trail. We're on the verge of being in the middle of nowhere. I go, wow. I put my foot up next to it, and that print on the trail is like twice the size of my foot. So I take out my camera, and I try to take a picture, and I get a notification on my 35 millimeter camera, lens error. I've never seen that before. So I shut the camera off, start it up again, lens error again. Angie pulls out her iPhone, battery's dead. I pull out my iPhone, battery dead. What? We had 3 cameras, all of them fail. Wow, that's never happened. So we go, oh, that was weird. So we walk back maybe 200-300 yards from there, and we're in this grove of trees. And I say a grove because the area around it is pretty barren. But we're on the edge of a wilderness area that goes for 20 miles into nothingness. And in this grove of trees that's probably the size of 4 football fields, we walk into the middle of it because this one game trail goes into the middle. And there in the middle was the biggest accumulation of elk bones that we had ever seen. I probably saw 6 or 7 elk vertebrae, skeletons, laying all throughout the grass out there. And they had looked like they were all in different states of being old. Like some were new, some were old, some weren't that old. But that was 2 strange things that happened. So we ended up taking a hike around the lake, and we go maybe 2 or 3 miles up one trail, and the view was good. So we take our phones out again, and we take a picture of just the lake, and the cameras worked. 3 miles out, and they finally worked. And it was just an awesome place, awesome view, but the camera's failing, and seeing that track was too weird. Too strange to be just a coincidence. So there was a trail in Colorado outside of Fort Collins that I always like to go to. I probably hiked it 25 times, 30 times. And I liked it because weird things happened out there. And I hiked that trail with Ben and his girlfriend. Angie and I hiked it many times. And one of the times we went out there, I said this in an earlier video. We're going out, and about 3 miles out from the parking lot, this little bird starts flying alongside of us. And every time we'd stop, it'd stop and just a couple feet from us, just look at us. Well, one of these times we stop, and sitting right next to where we were sitting was this perfect, like a 4 or 5 foot long stick. And Angie and I were talking about people who bang trees and try to get reaction from the woods. I said, hey, what the heck? I've never done it. Let's see what happens. So I pick up this stick and I wallop the side of this down tree, and the stick I'm holding blows up in my hands, showing, hey, what an idiot you are. I'm going to teach you a lesson. But I mean, it just blew into 1,000 pieces. And we were laughing out loud. We thought it was super funny. Now, it was cold like this. It was probably this time of the year. So we hike out a couple more miles, like 4 or 5, and we get to a point where we sit down, have lunch next to this river. A lot of planes flying in the air today. That's kind of weird. So we come back on the trail, and then there's this one area of the trail where it's real narrow, and you're kind of going down this alley with rocks on both sides of you. And I'm seeing Angie maybe 10 feet in front of me, and Angie walks around this stick that's protruding from the ground right in the middle of the trail that's about 7 or 8 feet long. It wasn't there when we went in. I go, Angie. She turns around and goes, what? I go, you just walked around there. She goes, I didn't even see it. She comes back, and right into this rock solid hard trail is this perfectly cleaned straight pole with a point at the end that's driven into the ground. And she goes, oh, that's weird. That's really weird. She goes, Dave, it was like it was placed for us. I go, I know. So it took me a couple minutes to work it out of the ground. That's how hard it was stuck in. And I brought it back. I still have that pole. And all of the branches and everything were neatly pulled out of it. It was way too tall to be a walking pole, but somebody or something made it for me and left it. That was the feeling we had when we found it, and we still have that feeling today. So, for what it's worth, I don't know. And I've told this story many times before, and I'll try to keep it short, but on another trail outside of Rocky Mountain National Park, just right on the fringe, might have been in the park at the time, we're walking around, and Angie goes, Dave, turn around. I turn around, there's a little boy right next to us. And I asked him where his parents were, and they said, oh, they're back here a couple, ways. I said, could you take me to him? He says, sure. And here's a guy laying in a tent and a woman sitting in a chair with another baby. And I said, hey, I found your son over here walking quite a ways away by the lake. Oh, yeah. Completely oblivious to the dangers out there. Namely, elk and moose, which are dangerous animals, especially moose. And they can kill you easily. And there's mountain lions all over the mountains out there. Very dangerous. And I said, yeah, there's been kids that have disappeared in this area. Oh, really? I go, yeah. You need to keep your boy in sight. Oh, okay, thanks a lot. I'll never forget that. Never forget it. Maybe we were put there for a reason to save that boy. I don't know. Very strange. One last story. Scott Carpenter, one of my best friends, lives in Tennessee. He's done a lot of research at Great Smoky Mountain National Park. One day we were coming back from a hike, and we're walking a ridge line off trail, and down below us, down below this ridge, in amongst a clump of trees, we hear these sounds. Scott's always walking with his camcorder running, and these sounds, they sound like people, but it's not people. And it sounds like there's 2 or 3 of them arguing. It's weird. Scott has the camera pointed down there. He knows. We're both looking at each other going, what is that? And you let it play for quite a while. We still talk about this. Well, he took that recording and he gave it to Scott Nelson, who did the analysis on Ron Moorhead's recordings coming out of the Sierra Sounds. And Scott said that that's the only other time he's ever evaluated a recording that was outside the human range, but seemed to have verbs and nouns connected to it. We didn't even know what we had at the time, but we knew it was something strange. And since that day, we've always walked around those hills with a recording device on. But appreciate Scott Nelson, and I should plug Scott Carpenter. His writing on his books is phenomenal, and he's written a book about the DNA analysis. And I would encourage you to go to Amazon. Scott sells his books on Amazon. Scott Carpenter, outstanding author, one of the most credible researchers you can imagine. So look for him. So anyhow, Friday video, something different like I promised you. And you gotta love that view. Absolutely stunning. So I appreciate you being here. Please give me a thumbs up if you like it. And subscribe. Please subscribe. And if you're looking for a Christmas gift, don't forget our website that's listed right under the description of the video, and all of our books are still in stock. I appreciate you guys being here. Have a great week.